I talk while we're waiting for the next MotoGP race to happen is, if you pay any attention to this, and you hear a lot of the riders talk about their base setup. And like I used to race 250 GP bikes, and what a base setup is standard setup from your bike that basically makes it work okay or good, like whatever your standards are on most tracks. Now it sort of depends on the tracks you have, because I know MotoGP, they have 20 tracks this season, or 19, and next season I think they're going to have another circuit added. So it's kind of hard to get a bike that works well on every single track, but you generally want to try to get it as good as you can on as many as possible. And like the base setup is sort of like the suspension sort of works, the brakes sort of work, the engine, you know, the engines are actually tuned, but you still want the engine, the gearing, all that sort of stuff. And every team has a base setup. They have once they figure out the base setup, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to get the actual detailed, you know, setup that you're going to use at the track for the race. And the sooner you get a base setup, it's so much easier. It makes your life. Some teams have just had a nightmare trying to get a base setup. Yamaha, for probably the last 2.5 seasons, they've not had a good base setup for their bikes. Some tracks the bike works, but a lot of tracks it's horrid, and you actually see that in the results. You see the, you know, whenever, you know, you see Rossi or Vinales, you know, up near the front, you know they've got the setup for that track figured out. And generally there are certain tracks that Yamahas work really well on, and surprisingly some of the tracks that Yamaha traditionally haven't worked well on, they're not working well at all with these bikes. So they haven't found the proper base setup for these bikes, and you can sort of see that as they spend a lot of time, you know, struggling, trying to find, you know, what things you need to adjust to get the bike working the way you need it to work. And that's one of the things you see when you see them pull into the pits, and they're talking to the engineer, the suspension engineer, the electronics guy, of course the manager for that particular bike. You know, because they're all trying to find out what the bike is doing to get that bike set up to, so you get the maximum performance. For example, at the Czech Grand Prix, I know Alex Rins, because they didn't get a lot of practice in the dry because the weather was so bad on the couple days before the actual race, they didn't have a good dry setup. So when they came out to the actual race on the Sunday, which was dry, he actually wore the tire out by you know, spinning it too much. And that was because they didn't get enough dry time to get a proper dry setup. So that's what they're trying to do on the weekends. Another team that has a real problem with setup is, without a doubt, KTM. They're using that steel Tellus frame, and I don't know if it's a feedback issue or whatever, but what's ever happening, it's not working for almost any of the riders. Zarco, who's, you know, is actually a very good racer. You know, like you look at him, you talk to him, and he looks so depressed and unhappy because his bike just is not working well, and that's because he can't get the bike to get a base setup to work with. And that's probably a case where they just, whatever their direction they're going is just wrong, and they haven't found a way to get that sorted out yet. One of the reasons why they had Danny Petrosa now on the team, because he spent so many years for Honda racing that he, as a test rider, is probably just a giant pool of knowledge. So unfortunately that sort of stuff takes time, so hopefully by maybe the late in the season or next season they might actually have a solution. Suzuki, they're actually pretty good. Their bikes seem to be working not too bad. They probably have the best handling bike out there. Suzuki's only problem is they're probably about 20 horsepower down, which doesn't sound like a lot, but you know, when you watch in the Austrian Grand Prix, like the very first straightaway, they got on the Ducati and Honda got on the gas, and it looked like you know, Alex Rins hadn't even opened the throttle yet. That's how fast he got left behind, and he very quickly got dropped by the top guys. And that's just the 20 horsepower you're missing. But there's no question on the tighter tracks that Suzuki's an awesome handling bike. Ducati, I think overall has a pretty good setup for their bike. They seem to be able to sort things out pretty quick, but Ducati does have, you know, one nagging issue that they've had for years, and that is their bike does not turn. There is no question it's not as good a handling bike as the Hondas and the Suzukis and the Yamahas. It has the one thing going for it is that tremendous Ducati horsepower, and they've done a lot of work to try to make the bike better, but it still is not turning as well as it should be. But overall, I think Ducati's actually got a pretty good setup. They seem to be working pretty good, and some tracks it just, you know, whatever your base setup is, the bike just doesn't want to work on it. Now Honda's kind of in a quandary because there's no question they've got a really good base setup for the new the 2019 RCB. But the problem is that they're trying to fix some handling woes. From what I'm understanding, from what I'm hearing and reading from Cal and Mark and Jorge, is that the riders are not getting a lot of feedback as to what the front tire is doing. Now the 18 bike, and to a lesser extent the 17, like, you could horribly abuse that front tire, but the bike did an awesome job of letting you know that, okay, yeah, you're getting to the point, don't go much further, and the riders could take advantage of that. And that's one of the reasons why you know, the 18 bike, Mark and Cal and whatnot, they were doing pretty good until Cal fell off and broke his ankle, and you know, Mark won the world championship on it, but he was essentially riding hurt with a dislocated shoulder, so he had to get surgery. The 19 bike, they had to change the frame to get more horsepower out of it, so they're not using the same frame. The frame they've been using on all the bikes that have been successful are still based on the 2013-14 bike that Mark won the first two championships on. Now they had to change the frame to allow for a larger airbox to allow the bike to make more horsepower, which of course changes your frame geometry, which has made the bike get that peculiar, the front wheel doesn't feel like it's attached to the bike anymore. Now Mark is actually riding along just saying no problem. He just if you actually watch him, he's going to the corner till the bike almost crashes, saves it, and then turns it and goes. So Mark can do that. He's 1 in a billion, or 1 in like 6 billion, whatever the population of the world is. Cal even readily admits he can't ride like that. Jorge can't ride like that, so Honda's trying to find some way to make the bike work. And one of the reasons Jorge has missed a bunch of races is because he got tossed off the bike so many times. He's managed to break so many bones that, you know, he actually had to stop and recover. Now they've got a new frame, which is a carbon reinforced frame, which they've been trying and testing. I don't think it's the exact answer, but it might be closer to what they need. And I think what Honda's really trying to figure out is to make the 2020 bike a better bike for everybody. They kind of got hurt last year with Jorge out, Cal out, Mark not able to ride at his full potential. They couldn't really develop the 19 bike before the season started. They sort of had to do all last minute stuff. So, but either way, Mark's still winning races, and you know, looking pretty good for the championship. Now Aprilia, of course, they're a small team. I don't think they've ever found a good base setup for it, but they've got so many problems with the lack of horsepower that it's kind of hard for them to go pretty much anywhere. I think KTM, if they could sort out whatever their issue is with handling, it'll probably go a long way to helping them. And Yamaha, you know, they're still trying stuff like crazy, but I don't know. They I think they really got to get their act together. But you can sort of see how important for racing to have a good base setup is to start with. When I was racing, I was pretty lucky that most of our tracks are, except for 2 of them, are pretty similar in layout and style. So the base setup I had worked on probably 7 of the 10 tracks that we raced on. And the other 2 actually, it didn't really matter because they were so different that you had to change everything pretty much anyways. Plus the other 3 were actually much more fun to race on, but we only raced on them once a year, so it was kind of hard to get a good setup every year. So anyways, I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions, comments, put them in the comments and I'll reply back to you if I have the information. DeathsStalker, signing off.